I guess I'm an historian before I've been a quilter. Suzanne Aubert, I was inspired to tell her story because she's quite close to me, and her time on the river, on the Wanganui River. I used it in my history as well, but I wanted to tell it in art form. And this one here was the beginning, really. It was the year of the priests, and John Vianney was, the icon was coming around the country, and he came to Ohakuni from Jerusalem. I lived behind the church, and John Vianney was set up in there. I'd prepared the place for him, and I thought, I can't leave him here on his own. I want to be there with him. So I went home and I got all my fabrics that I'd dyed. This out of eucalyptus, this from rusting, caustic soda, tea bags and iron. And this is muslin from the old hangi bags. And this is another dye from walnuts. And so I got all these fabrics, I brought them to the church, and I spent the whole day with John Vianney and his relic. And these are sort of, that's why I've called it He Oha relic. And these are reminded me of the relic in their repository. It was just so beautiful. The wording is from Ecclesiasticus. There's a season for everything, for every occupation under heaven. And for me, there's a time for sowing, time for keeping silent. There's such a lot in that. Things often start for me, and I make the fabric first, and this has been folded, cut silk, and it's been dipped in iron, caustic soda and tea bags. And then I had this lovely, beautiful piece that I thought looked like a tuara. Tuara in Māori is a backbone. And I thought about Suzanne and having the strength that she had. And then it was the Tapuao, King Tapuao's story about the red, white and black threads all must go through the same needle. And so I used that for healing, thinking about unity, and those were some of the thoughts of Suzanne Aubert as well. And then I thought I'd go back to France, and I was at Bishop Drennan's ordination, and he used the reading from Acts, which said, "You will be set apart." And I thought, that's it, that's what I'll call this little piece. And so a friend's grandmother's lounge suite was pulled apart, so I got her fabric. And these are all dyed again with walnut, eucalyptus. I popped this in here because that was where Suzanne was born. Tarea was the linen place nearby, and Leon had a silk. These were silk manufacturing places as well. Then Suzanne came to Auckland, and this is recording something of her coming and later life as well. And Piata was the young Māori woman who worked with her, who taught her some of the rongoa, the Māori medicine, taught her Māori language to go with what Bishop Pompelia had taught her on the way out, and helped her. I think I'm recognising in these designs here that she'd come from Māori. This is the visite, is the medicine, taking out and using the medicine for people. And this one here is, I've blown up the face of John Vianney, the Curé de Ars, because on one of her visits to him, he prophesied that she would go far away and the first mission would fall down. She'd go to a second place, and the third place he described the place that she would work. And when she got to Hiruharama, she looked at the schoolhouse and she said, "That is the place the curé told me I would be working in, but it's got 3 windows." And they said, "We've only just put the other window in." So that's why I've got the little schoolhouse in his eyes. This one here I've called Suzanne Aubert's cloak, and on the other side it's a baby's blanket. I'll lift it up. It's a baby's blanket, and I folded it, wrapped it up with rope, and put it in walnuts. And those walnuts had been sitting in my freezer for about 4 years, but because the cells had broken down, a lot of the pigment came out, so I learnt that that was a really good thing to do. I put on some wording. I know that she was inspired by John Vianney, And I imagined that she'd been inspired by the life of Thérèse of Lisieux and Bernadette of Lourdes. And the writing, being backwards, was so that when she was wearing it, it would be resonating in her heart. Then she went from Auckland to the Hawke's Bay. She'd left Auckland because the new bishop was closing down the school, and she was invited to go to the mission in Meani. And so these three are called Red Shed 1, 2 and 3. These are depicting the red shed where she had the medicines, where she was preparing the medicines, some maps of the Hawke's Bay, some of the words, the places that she is recorded as having visited. The greenery is significant of that she used the land, the plants from the land for her medicines. So this was a big start to her business. One of the other really important things, and I've got, it's actually a tui I've got stitched in there, but her father wasn't happy that she joined the convent, but during this time that she was over in Meani, he died, but he'd written earlier to say that you had done the right thing by going to the missions, and he mentioned that the nightingale had been singing, and that had given him the message that she was okay, and that was okay, so I popped that in there. This cloak here is about the healing as well. I've called it the healing cloak, he kaitaka rongoa, and this is the traditional tāniko weaving that the Māori did, the finger weaving, but I've used fabric instead. This is all silk of different colours. The colours depicting her life, pretty colourful, and also the bush and the land that gave her so much. I call them kete rongoa because she took a kete around with her, and she had her medicines in it, and she visited the people, and she was seen doing that. And so Suzanne, along with some of the sisters, came up to Hiruharama, up to Jerusalem in the Whanganui River, and up the river Suzanne, she started the foundlings, and so she started the medicine with Kempthorne and Prosser. She had the contract with or they took a contract out to make her medicines. When I was a child of 11 or 12, my sister married John Tahuparai, and his grandmother was the person who wrote the letter to Suzanne Aubert as she was dying. And I listened to Kui Wiki, we called her, talking about Mother Aubert when I went to stay with my sister. She used to pray the rosary, go to sleep, wake up, carry on where she went off. But I heard her name first uttered when I listened to Kui Wiki. So that was a beautiful connection with the river. Then she went off to Wellington. Some of Suzanne Aubert's sayings are quite quaint, and one of them was, "The wind has changed." So the last section I've called "The wind has changed," and that indicates a change of direction. This one here is, I called it the graduation cloak, and it's a big 6 metres of grey Dupion silk, and you know Dupion silk has a warp one colour and a weft another, and so I cut them out, cut out strips in different ways so that I'd get the 2 colourway. And so I've called this a graduation cloak because I felt that she had graduated in Māoridom in New Zealand, and she had respect and mana from everybody. This one here I called sacred geometry. Now, I was really interested in the headgear that the sisters wore, and so I came down here to Sister Jo, and she got the pattern out. She got all the material out, and I didn't plan this really, but I wanted to work with it, and I thought, whatever else could I do? Look at the mathematics of working it. So I did some maths here, and I worked out that you had to measure it out first, then gather it, then measure the spaces between, and then it was gathered, then it was folded, then it was ruched, and then the little pieces were opened and starched first, and then ironed and heated with these irons, hot irons in the little tube. So the nuns told me that they often burnt and scorched the fabric. So modern technology, I used baking paper in there so that I could heat the irons and keep them unscorched. So that was a bit of fun, really. This little one here I called the Song of Compassion, and it started out as being a little black square with a red line through it, and I collected some of the music, more Maria, which I connected her with Pompelia. These are all the lids from baked bean cans that I put with the fabric, and then when it's boiled up with walnut and all the other leftover plant material, it stains because the iron comes out of the metal. The Song of Suzanne, Song of Compassion. I had a series of doors that I was working on. This is how I started. I started this little tarnicle weaving with smaller pieces to see if it would work. So I'm thinking of technical things along with the story, and these started out initially when I was thinking about during the Exodus, when the paint was put above the doors, so God would know the families, and I used to think He would know anyway, they didn't need those marks. This one was reviewed as being somewhat unremarkable, but remarkable in some ways. And so this has been inspired by the clothing that Suzanne was wearing during the Hawke's Bay time, and then the Wellington time, and when the order was instituted. And so I had photos. I looked into the museum over here, the archives, and I saw these kinds of things, and I went home and saw these in my fabric stash. And this was her when she went to Rome, and I read some of the letters that came back from Rome, and I was just delighted because she kept talking about the red tape, the land of red tape, the land of Taihua, and she obviously was sometimes a little bit frustrated with that. It's probably an understatement. When the war broke out, she worked for the Red Cross, and so why I've put this in here. Even in her clothing to carry her bread and cheese, she had the pockets. And then this one tops it off for me. Had our Lord been judged in Rome, He would have been living still. And I loved that. And now this one here, Father Bernie Vella in 1981 was cleaning out the sacristy, and he said, he came to my house and he said, Merrilyn, all these things are not being used by the church anymore. Some of them have got holes, and do you want them? Well, I never say no. And so I took them, 1981, 2013, I decided to use them. And I'd been inspired by Diane Savona, who does artwork, and she archives things inside fabric, and I was inspired by that. And so I took some of these little pieces that sat above the chalice, and I made my own tongs because I didn't want to put that much metal inside here in case it stained. These parts were parts of garments that had been stained with the wine, the blood of Christ, and so I accentuated that by doing a little bit of red stitching, pink stitching, but otherwise these are parts of garments that were no longer used, that were ripped in some ways, and I've taken the best part of them and put it together, and I've called that artefacts. And part of that is my gratefulness to those who keep stories alive by what they collect. So thinking of Jo Gorman in this case, and those who've come before her in the case of Suzanne Aubert.